Hey, everybody, and welcome to our extra sized, but not really 25th episode of the Collective Spotlight. My name is Danny Morales. I'm the host here, as always. I am Steven Spivikless today in the store. Homeboy Maddie Durango's in there right now taking care of customers. My guest today is supposed to be Ram V, the writer of Swamp Thing. I know he is over in the UK, so I don't know if maybe he got the times mixed up. We're holding out. We're waiting. He should be here. He's scheduled from 5:30 to 6. And then we have another creator. While I'm waiting for Ram, hopefully he's coming. I sent him another email. I wanted to let you guys know about Future State. The reason Ram actually just jumped in as I was talking about this. So, 2 seconds and I will introduce the man himself. But Future State started today with Tuesday release from DC. There is Flash Future State, which was a great book as a Flash reader. There's a Wonder Woman 84 variant for that. There's Harley Quinn Future State, homegirl Stephanie Phillips from Tampa. We love Stephanie Phillips. This is her first DC outing, and she absolutely killed it with Harley Quinn. Again, a Wonder Woman variant. We had the next Batman finally come out with Batman, Harley Quinn variants, and then here is the A cover. And Superman of Metropolis also hit this week. Wonder Woman also hit, featuring the brand new Wonder Woman with some beautiful covers by Jenny Frieson and Adam Hughes. And then, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce the man himself, the very talented Ram V. How are you doing, Ram?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. So, I did not show this one just yet. So Ram is writing the Future State Swamp Thing. And this is not, this isn't the first time you've had to write the character, because you've had a chance to write some Justice League Dark and things like that in the past.
Actually, my first proper story at DC, kind of long form story at DC, was the Justice League Dark Annual, which was a Swamp Thing centric story anyway. So it's kind of full circle in some ways. Yeah.
Full circle. And I was going to say, is this, so talk to me a little bit about Swamp Thing. Is this a long time coming? Is that a favorite character of yours, or did DC just kind of reach out to you and say, hey, would you be interested in writing Swamp Thing?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I talked about it a little bit in my newsletter today. So my gateway into comics, not just as a childhood reader, but more as someone who thought like, oh, maybe one day I could write comics, was really the kind of 80s Vertigo stuff. Oh. I got in off of reading Sandman, and then I read on the internet somewhere that Neil Gaiman had been recommended to Karen Berger by Alan Moore. And so I was like, okay, who's Alan Moore? I hadn't read comics at that time, and I was like maybe 18, 19. I hadn't read a lot of comics, so I went over and looked up Alan Moore, and I found out he did this Saga of the Swamp Thing, and Watchmen, and all of that, and that's kind of what brought me into comics. So, yeah, and so I went when DC asked me, hey, we're doing this thing, which was originally 5G, and they were like, hey, we're going to do this 5G thing where we're looking at new characters and interesting takes on these characters. What do you want to do? So they didn't come to me with, do you want to do Swamp Thing? They said, what do you want to do?
Okay.
And I said, well, here are a couple of things I'd like to do. And one of them was this Swamp Thing pitch. And I heard back from a couple of editors after I'd sent it in. They were like, ah, man, you killed it on the pitch. And so that was actually the pitch for the series that's coming up in March.
Okay.
And so once we knew that, okay, we wanted to do this series, lots of things changed in the interim from 5G over to where things are now. And so then I was told that, hey, we're going to do this Future State event. Do you want to do like a 2-parter standalone Swamp Thing story for that? And I said, yeah, sure. Come up with that.
That's awesome. And now let me ask you, because I do know it was announced a while back that you were doing the ongoing as well. Yeah. How much will the Future State Swamp Thing 2 issues tie into what you're planning on doing in the ongoing?
So I wouldn't say it ties in necessarily, but I would say if you read Future State, you're going to find little hints, little pieces here and there that you may not notice right now, but when you're reading the main series, you're gonna go, "Oh, that's why that thing shows up in Future State, huh?" And so it's
Wow.
more of a retrospective connection than a tie-in, if you will. Yeah,
Okay, I love it. I love it. Now, Ram, we're going to talk a ton of Swamp Thing in a second, but I do
sure.
want. I think you're the perfect person to talk about this, especially with this being the first wave of the Future State books.
Right.
People did not know what to call Future State. You know, whether a reboot, a hiatus, things
Sure.
like that. As a writer and as maybe somebody who DC even kind of pitched you the idea, how do you define what Future State is? I know it is. I think perfectly what they say in the first page of the book is the kind of an unwritten future. Is that
Right.
kind of the way you approach it?
I mean, well, it's not really unwritten because I wrote it, but no, the way it was presented to me, and really, I think more important thing is what did I make of it, and I'm sure you could ask this question to 5 other writers and artists, and they will all have different takes on it. But the thing that I wanted to do with this was we're gonna have these ongoing series, right? We're gonna have Catwoman, we're gonna have Justice League Dark, we're gonna have Swamp Thing. We want to do a story that is potentially somewhere in the future of these ongoing series.
Okay.
Which means somewhere down the line, things could take a turn and lead to this future. Whether that is the future, whether that's a potential future, whether that's a future that our characters must then avoid,
Okay.
that depends on what you want to do with it. But the idea is to give you a lens into what lies in the future for these ongoing series that are coming up. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm glad you were able to kind of put that into words like that, because I have been telling people, I've been a big champion of DC for a long time, and I literally
Right.
my sub is every DC book,
Right.
and I really didn't think Future State was going to be a whole rebirth situation, but people didn't want to believe it till they saw it, and
Yeah. I mean, look, the internet has a way of crafting its own narrative, right? So people are going to believe what they're going to believe. But I always say this when other people ask me, "Oh, what do you think about reader reaction, and what do you think?" Like, don't worry about any of that stuff. Did you like the story? That's all that matters. Just tell a good story. Just read a good story, and then you can spend hours trying to figure out how it all builds and connects and all of that. But none of that matters if you didn't enjoy the story.
Exactly.
So the primary focus is the good stories. Enjoy them, and sit back, strap in, and wait for how they all build and how they all connect.
Well, and kind of where I was going to go with my next question is one of the amazing things that I'm not sure if you knew that you were doing it until after the fact, or maybe until right now that I tell you, but there's a ton of Swamp Thing fans out there. The character himself,
Right.
and he does not get written. Yes, on Halloween he might get a story in the annual there, but he doesn't get his very much his love, since Vertigo has kind of gone away. And right now, the fact that you are bringing him back out, not just for a 2-issue mini, but for a series of his own, a lot of customers are very excited, whether they're from the Alan Moore era Swamp Thing or even the Scott Snyder New 52 Swamp Thing. Everybody's excited, which leads me to ask, did you how much influence do you have from like the Alan Moore Swamp Thing, maybe Scott Snyder's New 52 Swamp Thing, and how much of this is just what's been brewing in your mind as a Swampy fan?
I mean, like I said, my gateway into comics was the Alan Moore run on Swamp Thing. So I think that's always going to have like an overarching umbrella influence over anything I do. But I also think that the important thing to take away from that run, and I had this discussion with a few people when I was writing this comic, is Alan Moore built into his story the idea that Swamp Thing would change and would move on. One of the early issues, he buries Alec Holland's bones and moves on. So what is that? I mean, forget the details of the story. As a big picture thing, that tells you that the character is bigger than its tether, its host. It lasts forever. It has been there before Alec. It will be there after Alec. And so I kind of take that as a aesthetic for my writing choices as well. That although I have the influence from the Alan Moore era of Swamp Thing, and I'm certainly gonna pick pieces of Scott Snyder's run and Charles Soule work on it, and Brian K. Vaughan's work on it. The idea is this is gonna be my run, and so I don't want you to look at I don't want you to see the superficial influences. I want you to know that, oh, this character is an evolution rather than an influenced version of all those runs. So I think when people open this Swamp Thing series, they're gonna see that this character is clearly born of all of these great parents, if you will. But they're also going to see that this is something completely new. We have not seen a Swamp Thing like this before. So, and I think that's been the reaction to reading Future State as well from a lot of people, is this feels very familiar, but it also just feels like incredibly new because we haven't seen someone do this. So
absolutely. Again, a shout out to our friend Stephanie Phillips. Harley Quinn did that as well, where it was a character that you're very familiar with, but at the same time, it's like, ooh, this is a different side of her. And I think that's one of the great things Future State is doing. Talking about the Future State Swamp Thing, one of the cool things I saw you did there is, you kind of gave him, I don't know whether to call it like a family or like a squad, I guess, kind of. Some love him, some hate him. But you were able to do that with him, and as I read through that issue, you in just one book, you were able to give a lot of those characters some depth and development, and it was very clear who loved Swampy and who kind of didn't. Where was your idea of giving him those compatriots, kind of, and giving him peers?
I mean, I think it ties into the core concept, and I don't want to spoil anything that's going to happen with issue 2, so I don't want to talk too much about my motivations, but they're pretty central to what happens with the story. I guess the only thing to consider is I ask myself, well, here's this character who's clearly survived the end of the world as we know it. And sure, he may be a plant elemental and almost godlike creature, but what would he miss? And he would miss other people. And so if a creature were to exist who had control over life itself in some ways, he'd probably build other people to keep himself sane. So if you want to go that far, rather than family or squad, these are all Wilsons for Swamp Thing who is cast away.
I love it. That's a great reference. But no, I absolutely love that dynamic. It was very interesting to read along. And one thing that I think I hope people don't lose this sight in comics is comic books are about the story. It's not always about when the heroes put on their suits and they punch and fight. There's a lot of heart that goes into comic writing, and I feel like you really captured it in this first issue.
Yeah, I come from that school of thought, certainly, that yes, you need to be entertained, but if a story can entertain you and do something more, then it should, because there's only so many times you can watch someone punch another person and it be entertaining. And there's only so many times you can do it to save the world. So there has to be something more, and usually the only time that matters is when that something more, it says something about what it is to be human, what it is to be human in 2021, in 2020, So I'm always focused on that aspect of things. It doesn't matter whether I'm writing, Catwoman or Swamp Thing or Green Lantern or some kind of no superpowers detective. Whether it's a jazz musician struggling, it has to be fundamentally about what it means to be human.
Yes, which I love, and that's one thing I really love about comic books. I mean, at their core, they are a lot of them are superhero stories, but you guys as writers have really come up to the plate and started doing a lot with character development, a lot with heart, a lot with reaching out to the readers, and I think that's amazing. So I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a character that shows up here that's not a plant, and the best way that you can answer this is this a character that you remember from your youth? Like, what was the specific reasoning, the best that you can answer it without any spoilers, of why you chose this person?
I think that character is truly equal and opposite to the character that we are trying to present. At least from a philosophical point of view. So
okay. I like it.
That's why I chose that character.
I think we're still in the we didn't spoil anything, but I got the answer I wanted.
Good.
Talk to me real quick about getting to work with Mike Perkins. He's a local guy. He's from Tampa out here in Florida. What was it like? You're out in the UK, so especially in the COVID times, what was it like having to work with an artist that way?
Oh yeah, I DM him anytime I want to, and he keeps sending me updates on pages on Facebook. So it's been great. Frankly, I think I pretty much talked to Mike on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So we're pretty in sync. The thing I really appreciate with Mike is, I'll tell you a little story. When we were working on these issues, I came up with I hit a kind of a wall, and I was like, I don't know how to solve this particular storytelling problem, because we'd already worked on the issues, and then we got news from editorial going like, we need to change this one thing, and I was just like, well, that screws up the entire story. How do we change it? And I was talking to Mike about it, and Mike's like, I remember a character, and he pulls out like a character that's in the story now, which wasn't originally in the story. And he pulls out this character, and he says, that works. And I was like, that does work. Mike, how did you know this character exists? And Mike's just one of these guys who apparently has encyclopedic knowledge of obscure DC characters.
He does. A lot of times, if you look at a Mike Perkins cover, there's more than one character on it, because he can draw anybody. I've seen his Champions covers where he has, Spider-Man and Hulk, everybody's on there. The guy loves to draw multiple characters, and he is like an encyclopedia of knowledge. I love Mike Perkins.
Yeah, so that's been great. And I was also told that when Mike and I first started working together, he said, he'd been offered a couple of different projects, and he chose to work on this one, partly because he loved the character Swamp Thing, but also because he said, I looked at the pitch and it was really interesting. And so I always appreciate that when people are working on a story because they found it interesting on a fundamental level. And then beyond that, if you then go and see that Mike's this guy who's probably read every story that came out, to interest that guy, there must be something in the pitch,
Yeah, this isn't Mike's first rodeo. He's seen he's read a lot of books, he's helped create a lot of books.
Yeah.
So that's all, and it's good to know that two Swamp Thing, big Swamp Thing fans are on taking care of this book right now, because like I said, I'd lose count if I tried to count how many times somebody came in trying to grab some Alan Moore Swamp Thing. Like we reorder. Right. This is something that's older than me, and I have to order it all the time. And so when I finally was able, when those people were coming in, I was finally like, hey, in 1 month or 2 months, there's going to be a Swamp Thing Future State. And then once the ongoing was announced, I was like, and then there's going to be a series. Like,
right.
I mean, these people got so excited, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm glad. And yeah, it's always one of those things, isn't it? The question really to do this is not whether this character has fans, because I'm sure, you could pick a character in the DCU and you'll find people who are fans of that character. Mm-hmm. The question is, can we recontextualize this character? Because this was an 80s, 90s superhero who'd been written for the world in the 80s and 90s. We're in the 2020s now, and I guess the thing that I'm most excited about is people who read the pitch went, okay, this is taking that character and doing something that's relevant now with it. and so I'm pretty excited for to see what people think when they read the character. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think they're going to be absolutely blown away with the 2 issues that you guys have here. I haven't gotten a
Yeah.
chance to
Thank
read the
you.
second one yet. But you left me at the end of the first one saying like, oh my god, I need number 2. When is this? Okay, but I really, man, I can't like say this enough. The fact that you're bringing Swamp, and like you said, this was all meant to bring some characters that weren't always showcased, and that's what I always told people. And Swamp Thing's one of those. And he was the member of Justice League Dark, or he shows up in a Constantine book, but he never has his own book other than a miniseries, maybe. And what you're working on is planned as an ongoing, correct?
It's planned as a 10-issue season, and we pitched it as a 10-issue season. And so this is probably a good thing to shout out about. If it does well, if it has the readership that it needs to have, and if there's obvious indication that people are buying and reading this thing on a regular basis, then I think we can have that conversation about what's going to happen in season 2. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm glad. I mean, we still got a little bit of time, but I'm glad you came on the show to tell me that, so that way I can help get it out there.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's what we're here for as retailers, But yeah, so I unrelated to your book, but it's Swamp Thing related. I'm just going to ask you for your 2 cents. Sure. Did you end up watching the live action show, and what did you think of it?
I did. I watched, I think, the first half of it, to be honest, and I quite liked it. At least those early episodes, I quite enjoyed. And from a purely sort of unconnected point of view, I think this is my complaint with Swamp Thing in general. I think you need to have an incredible imagination to be able to tell long form stories, and you need to think big with Swamp Thing. And for me, I think that's where the show kind of they focused in on the small rather than the big.
Yes.
And so it's a take, and I think necessarily a lot of TV does that, where it becomes about the drama between these existing characters. But to me, I think that's underplaying the potential of a Swamp Thing who could literally go anywhere in the world, who could travel to other planets if he wanted to, So there has to be, I guess it becomes a question of balancing that kind of big concept idea with the character stuff. And yeah, I think that show for me did it really well in the first first episodes that I saw.
So let me ask you, just because you're the first guy of with DC Marvel credits, like a good amount of credits to your name. If somebody and I guess I'm asking you just to speak for yourself, but as a comic writer, if somebody comes up to you from the movie or television sector and says they don't necessarily want you to write the script, but they say, hey, I want your help understanding this character, whether it be Swamp Thing or any other character you've worked on.
Sure.
Would you be is that something comic writers would be open to, or are we just naive on the outside thinking that that's something you guys even have time for?
I mean, I'm sure there are people who consult with TV and film shows on a regular basis. I guess professionally speaking, it comes down to, okay, well, what are you going to pay me for my time and my knowledge? And if that works out, then people join as consultants, people join as supervising writers, people join as producers sometimes. Okay. So I'm sure that's a thing that's already done anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So Ram, again, Swamp Thing, thank you for coming on the show. I still got a couple minutes with you. The show actually, we jumped right into me just getting you to come on the show. The show actually started as an indie spotlight. So I said to myself, oh man, I don't want people to beat me up because I got Ram on here talking about a DC book. So,
well, I do a lot of indie stuff as well. So
really not too long ago, you did Blue and Green, which was a very awesome independent book that was, you featured a jazz musician, and it was kind of like supernaturally a little bit in there, a little bit of like almost horror feel. Talk a little bit about Blue and Green if you can, real quick, because we have a couple copies still in the store.
Yeah. So Blue and Green is a story of a young jazz musician who is a struggling musician, if you will, and has never quite realized his potential, and he goes back home to attend his mother's funeral, and discovers the photograph of a person that he does not know in her belongings. And he becomes obsessed with finding out who the person in that photograph is, because the person in the photograph is another 60s jazz musician. And that search, which starts off as this plain curiosity, turns into this downward spiral as the deeper he gets into discovering this person's identity, the deeper down his own rabbit hole of genius and music and performance he goes. And that sort of obsession is manifested as this kind of demonic, ghostly, Lovecraftian character that you see in the book. But really, it's a story about. I'm sure we've all asked ourselves that question at some point. If I'm trying to make something beautiful, have I experienced enough to tell this story? Have I suffered enough to draw this painting? Have I taken enough pains to create this art? And I suppose, to me, there is a horror that sits at the bottom of that question, and I wanted to explore that. So the art on the book is by Anandar K, who to me is a undiscovered master, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. That was actually going to be my very next thing. Is the art in this it's very different but amazing. It's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, and he's done another book with me called Graffiti's Wall, which was very much pen and ink style, and then this one is more akin to John Muth or Dave McKean or Bill Sienkiewicz, and so I think it invokes that spirit of jazz.
Yeah, and I really love this. I think first of all, you're on social media. You're a monster at social media, because that's how we found out about this. You were pushing it during the FOC time, and I straight up said, all right, let's order a couple copies. But yeah, you're out there on social media. What have you noticed? I know some writers don't use social media that much. I can imagine when you write something, maybe you kill somebody's favorite character, your mentions blow up. But how have you found that balance? Because I do notice that you interact and you use it for promotion and everything.
I'm super egotistical, and I have no problems ignoring people who want to shout at me. So I have no problems using social media. If you come at me, I'll just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. I really don't care. I don't have time for people who want to argue, who want to say rude things. I just don't.
But you have positive interactions on there, right?
Yeah. I'll absolutely interact positively with people who want that. All I mean to say is, like, the negative stuff doesn't affect me, because I'm just like, talk to the hand, man.
Yeah. Well, you're doing the right thing, because honestly, I think comic readers do love. I think Donny Cates has been one of the big ones. They love being able to read the book and then straight up, be like, "Oh, Ram, I can't believe you did that," and kind of like have that dialogue, especially in 2020 when people weren't even getting really to leave the house.
Yeah, and I totally look. I also understand when people choose to move away from it, because people deal with that kind of stuff in very different ways. And I guess the way I grew up was, if someone shouts at you, like, they're wasting their voice, not your time. So yeah, I'm pretty good at filtering my social media interactions well. So
that's awesome, Ram. So thank you so much for your time, man. I'm glad. Hopefully, honestly, once the ongoing starts, I'll see if we can have you back on, and maybe even get Mike on as well, especially since he's local.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love to. Yeah,
I didn't think about it. Honestly, I was talking to the boss today, and I'm like, isn't Mike from Tampa? He's like, yeah, I know Mike. I'm like, oh, God, we missed the boat on that one. But okay. So maybe in a couple months.
Yeah, he's doing some incredible work on the ongoing right now. Like, if you think Future State looks good, well, you're not ready for the ongoing issues.
Oh, I bet he with a little more time too, because with just the short format of 2 issues. Oh, I'm excited. But before you go, Ram, just tell anybody that might be picking this up off of the shelves today, tomorrow, whenever they come into the LCS, tell them what to expect when they pick this up.
You're gonna read a story set at the very end of time, where Swamp Thing has turned into a god who presides over this world that is bereft of humans. But will he yet find his humanity at the end of all of this? read to find out.
Yes, it's a great read. I've already read it. If you're grabbing this at the Collective, all of our feature states are returnable, so we always make sure you get something you love in your hands. And if you end up loving Ram stuff, for sure check out Blue and Green. I think we have 2 copies left. And
yeah, it's been very. I mean, I've been very blessed to have it be on like multiple Best of the Year lists. It was IGN and AV Club's graphic novel of 2020. So yeah, pick it up and thank you if you choose to support my work.
Yep, take it easy, man. And like I said, we're gonna help push that book, and we're definitely gonna make sure Swamp Thing becomes more than just 10 issues.
Yeah, cheers, Danny. Thank you so much.
Take it easy, Ram. You take it easy. Stay safe. Thanks for joining us, man.
Bye. See you guys.
Hey, so that was our good friend Ram V. Thank you, Maddie. And Maddie's actually bringing. So my next guest, he's running a little late. He had a prior engagement, but my next guest is going to be David Pepose from Scouts Honor. Some of you guys actually might remember him from Spencer and Locke. He's done a very successful Kickstarter in the OZ as well. Let me see where David is at. Ready when you are. And with that being said, I do want to give a huge shout out to Ram V. I know the show is typically a indie show, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to have Ram on here just because he does come from indie roots. And to be honest, to see him getting to write so much DC goodness is awesome. And we honestly hope that our good friend Stephanie Phillips, who started, to be honest, came onto our radar through A Man Among Ye from Image Top Cow, and now she's going to be writing Harley Quinn ongoing. We really hope that these can be examples of how the indie community eventually gets up to that level. I do want to say, if you haven't checked out Future State Wonder Woman, we have a good amount of copies left. This was a great read, first appearance, great copy to something to just pick up, whether you're a Wonder Woman fan or a comics fan. Plus, that is an absolutely beautiful Jenny Frieson cover. And speaking of beautiful, I have David right here joining me.
Hi.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. So sorry for running a little bit behind, but I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for taking the time to chat.
Absolutely. So the book is Scouts Honor.
Yep.
That's the new one. I was telling people you've also worked on, was it Spencer and Locke?
Yep. That was my my breakout book.
That was the big book. I think we even have a print here in the store that our good associate Steven Spivak has had for a while, and he put
yes.
up there.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. Thank you for representing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, this has been a fun book. A book that's been a long time coming. For those who don't know what Scouts Honor is about, it's after a nuclear war, a cult has risen from the ashes, and their Bible is an old Boy Scout manual. So our series follows Kit, who is sort of the embodiment of all things that are good with the Ranger Scouts of America. There's just one catch. This is a hyper-masculine survivalist society that only allows men to serve. And so Kit has had to conceal her identity as a woman in order to pursue her true calling as a Ranger Scout. The problem is Kit's going to make a pretty chilling discovery that cuts all the way back to the Ranger Scouts creation. And so she's going to find herself losing her religion as she embarks on a dangerous quest for the truth. So it's kind of like Fallout meets Mulan with a little bit of Hunger Games, The Last of Us, and Handmaid's Tale thrown in for good measure. Yeah, it's just been a really fun book with artist Luca Casalinguida. Mm-hmm. And surprisingly, maybe the most personal book I've written. I think it's certainly in a way perhaps the most autobiographical, even though I was not raised in a cult.
Were you?
My brothers were.
Okay.
My younger brothers were, and that was kind of the genesis of this idea, was being the outsider looking in. For them, it was about the camaraderie and the learning the practical skills and hanging out with your friends. Whereas on the outside, you see the costumes and you see the laws, and you don't have to squint too hard for it to be seen as kind of like a cult. And that's a lot of what the series is about. Is anybody who's read Howard Zinn knows that history is written by the victors. And it's often a game of telephone that kind of twists and mutates and bends in its own mythology. What happens when that continuity is cut? What happens when, how does humanity find its own continuity and its own meaning from the scraps of the old world? And in this case, it's a Boy Scout manual, and they've sort of built their own society based on that, in terms of sort of conquering the wastelands and survival at all costs. And Kit is she's going to have to really kind of navigate how does she maintain her own ethical and spiritual values while navigating the human institution of it all, which can be kind of corrupt. So, it's very much inspired, not just by, seeing my brothers as scouts, my own kind of spiritual and political reawakening as a practicing Jew, who grew up in a very conservative house in Missouri, and sort of figuring out how I kind of reawoke from all of that when I left home, down to things like real world things like the Catholic priest scandals, and sort of the disillusionment that so many people felt once those horrific stories came to light, and their own crises of faith, navigating that in the aftermath. But also post-apocalyptic Boy Scouts, super fun stuff like that.
The pitch or the premise almost sounds like an Onion article, these post-apocalyptic men find Boy Scout manual. Have it as religious text. So tell me where that idea. I know you talked about how your brothers were scouts, but the idea that would become the basis of their morality, really. I know the book isn't necessarily a humor book, but it sounds hilarious.
It's funny. I feel like that's like the MO for all of my books, is come up with a concept that's like ridiculous on its face and absurd, and then play it completely straight and make you cry about it. That's where it came from. Another big influence on this book was a show called The Path. A lot of people didn't see it. It was on Hulu. Aaron Paul was in it, from Breaking Bad, but it's the story of kind of a Scientology style cult, and this guy, his struggles as he's become disillusioned with this religion, and what happens to him and his family, and sort of the de facto second in command of this cult, who's been sort of filling in while their prophet leader is like dying in like South America. And I thought to myself, that felt like really good drama, and it really kind of spoke to me as somebody who is spiritual, but it definitely follows his Judaism in a different way than, say, my parents and their parents before them. And so I thought to myself, what's the weirdest thing that a cult could use as its Bible and still have it make sense? And I'm glad I didn't do a D&D manual. That probably would have been a much shorter book. I did, but a scout manual, when I thought about it, it started clicking to me, because the Boy Scouts as an organization, it's so fully fleshed out, and there's so much mythology to it and so much imagery to it that it didn't seem that much of a stretch. For example, there are scout laws that are in the manual, and things like you shall obey your scoutmaster without question. That you don't have to squint, that can be turned into a cult very quickly. People get super into it, and that becomes a crucial part of their identity. And anything that becomes a crucial part of your identity can be twisted like that. And so the more I thought about it, though, and the more I developed this story with Aftershock, the more I realized, like, there's something about the Boy Scouts in particular that really taps into kind of the current moment that we live in, and the culture that we live in. We are a society that's shaped by toxic masculinity, and that is a challenge for everybody. The men who live in it, the women who have to kind of navigate it, let alone members of the LGBTQ community. And we get to kind of tap into those latter two groups in our book. The idea of sort of the rise of kind of the evangelical thinking, and sort of this dissuasion of higher education and critical thought. Just the fetishizing, I should say, of the military and weapons and survivalism. It doesn't, this is the cauldron we're all living in. I just kind of put it in fast forward and added a few A-bombs to it. I think though it was an interesting experience writing this book. I pitched it a while back. I pitched it I pitched it August of 2019. And obviously a lot of things have changed since then. I signed the paperwork, the contract for this book 2 weeks before lockdown.
Oh.
So writing 80% of this book in lockdown certainly flavored it in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, between working on this and my previous book, The OZ, which is kind of a dystopian fantasy war book, I certainly kind of found myself thinking like, what kind of energy do I want to put into the world in 2020, And I'm glad I stuck with it because it was a reminder that my books, anybody who's read my books knows I usually start in a dark place and work my way up and work my way out. It's always about the redemptive arc to it. And I realized that, my books, especially Scout's Honor, it's not meant to be bleak. It's meant to sort of show that like Kit believes that there's a better world ahead of us, that we can fight for it and we can build it. And she, in a lot of ways, is kind of the most hopeful character I've ever written because she's not scarred by this long-term trauma that a lot of my other characters have. She's actually remarkably fresh-faced for having grown up in the apocalypse. We get to kind of watch her kind of get her clock cleaned in real time and sort of, watch her find her feet after that. But yeah, it was definitely I had to kind of write through my own anxieties and my own fears to get this book out. And it just was a reminder. It was a reminder of sort of some of the hairs that I'm splitting with this book, because yeah, I'm certainly not pro cult. I don't think this book is pro cult one iota, but this book is not anti-religion. And I think that's kind of the dichotomy that Kit has in this book is how do you keep your spiritual and ethical values intact while still addressing injustice and secrets and lies? And at the same time, her religion, her belief is really her armor in a way. It's the thing that kind of keeps her going when she's otherwise, the tank is empty. Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of people, that is something that I think that is the appeal of religion for a lot of people. It's that the connectivity with those who have come before you, the people, especially in Judaism, there are a lot of people who can't practice. And that's sort of the reason why I do. It's also sort of throwing a penny in the well of the universe. But it's also, I think, something that can, and it's not for everybody, but can kind of give you that last bit of strength, that last bit of endurance, that last bit of hope that you need to turn it all around. And, everybody's, I think, spiritual journey is a little different, but I think everybody has some degree of that. And I think that's the thing that can help add a little bit more meaning to a world that often doesn't have it.
Yeah. David, I didn't know that you were a crime reporter.
Yeah.
So the only thing I really see, and because I came from, I did journalism. I went to journalism school before I ended up here.
Nice.
But the only two things in common those things really have is writing.
Yep.
So it's not a natural move.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Sure. Well, my career trajectory into comics is less of a straight line and more of a zigzag. I did journalism. It's funny looking back how naive I was. I used to think journalism was the safe job, the safe career path. My aunt was a copy editor at the Washington Post, and so I was kind of like, oh, that's really cool. And journalism. I remember Neil Gaiman saying he used to be a journalist, and I thought okay, that was something that really kind of hit my skill sets. I was never afraid of a word count. And I was never, it certainly was not afraid of a deadline after all that. So I worked in journalism in college. I kind of stumbled into it there. And, I did some internships, but I had been thinking, what's my astronaut job? And my astronaut job was working in comics. And so I did some creative stuff on the side. I did theater. I directed some plays in college. I was the president of the Brandeis University Comic Book Club, which is like nerd on nerd on nerd. And I eventually, after 3 years of knocking on the door, managed to get an internship at DC Comics. And so I interned there the summer of 2008. And for those who might not remember that summer, that was the summer of Batman R.I.P., Final Crisis, and the worst economic recession of my lifetime. And so there were no jobs to be had. And I really credit, there was somebody I credit in really turning me around, because he's also the editor on Scout's Honor, which is Mike Martz. He was the editor of the Batman line at the time. And he kind of sat me down and said, nobody walks onto the Yankees. And what he meant by that is, like, this was not the end of my journey. This was the first step. Mm-hmm. There are people, you play in the minors, and then you go on the farm team, and then you go on the bigger teams, and then you get in the Yankees. It also reminded me that there's a wide spectrum of work you can do in the comics industry. You don't, if your goal is, I'm going to write Batman, or I'm going to write Spider-Man, you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, there are more NBA players than people who have written Spider-Man. And not only that, but like, that's, even if you do that, that's a gig with a shelf life. Is that what you're going to pin your whole life on? And so it made me realize, like, oh, I could tell stories in the comics industry, and, I could tell them in any genre, and any publisher, and any form of distribution that I can. That's something you can do your whole life. It still took me a while to figure that out, though. That was an ongoing kind of discovery. So I landed at the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. That was sort of the job that I found in the recession. And it was a great first gig. I covered crime. I covered state politics. I often covered a lot of night shift stuff. So okay. I was calling police stations every night. I'm pretty sure I was part of the world's first case of double homicide. There were two guard llamas that had been bowed and arrowed to death. The exciting beat, didn't you, Dave? The exciting stuff, but car accidents, gang violence. The Berkshires were kind of seen as like a finishing school for I believe it was the local Bloods. Because like it wasn't Springfield, it wasn't Albany, it was right in the middle. So it was kind of, you could cut your teeth there as a gang member, as like a gang internship.
Wow.
Not as an
This is things only the local crime reporter would know.
Yeah, like I joke, they do. The Bloods do not have internships, but you know what I mean. It was an area that was the rich people's summer homes next to like abject poverty, like post General Electric moved out. So it was a really interesting place to do journalism, and that was really good in terms of sort of like getting me out of my shell a little bit, and me thinking on my feet, because oftentimes I was sharing beats with people. I was the youngest guy there. I had to really kind of fight my way onto crime and state politics, and so it was a really fun learning experience. But at the time I was also moonlighting at Newsarama. I was their reviews editor for a long time. I just wrapped up my tenure there last summer. I was there for 12 years. Wow. And I was there for a few years. I love the job. I still have dreams that I'm in the newsroom. I certainly miss it. There's a certain, and you would know this, there's a certain camaraderie of being in a newsroom that you can't replicate anywhere else. But it's like Neil Gaiman had said, it's perfect training for comics. You know how to write fast, you know how to write on the deadline, you know how to write within a certain amount of space. And so that becomes the way you think. And I at least learned how to write pretty modularly. So kind of figuring out like, okay, this scene, I like this scene, but it doesn't work here. Let me file off the transitions, shift it a little lower, or this is all the room I've got to tell one story. But if I had more room for online, this is what the extras would look like. This is what a sequel might turn into.
Oh.
So I wound up getting into Columbia's publishing program. So I moved to New York, wound up getting a job at CBS television out of that, just kind of on happenstance. And at that time, I was not feeling creatively fulfilled. And I was reading a lot of comics that weren't really clicking with me. And so I realized that I had to really kind of make a big decision about I needed to change my relationship with comics or I needed to leave. And so I had written a bunch of shorts just to see if I could do it. And I finally took the plunge and I wrote the first issue of Spencer and Locke. And that kind of became my breakout book. And I had moved out to Los Angeles to try to do an office job. Realized very quickly, why would I get beat up at an office job when I could just be writing comics and people could like me for it? And so I've been doing that ever since. It's the best job in the world. I'm so grateful for it. I couldn't be more grateful for the army of readers and journalists and retailers who have all stepped up to the plate time and time again and really advocated for my stuff. And yeah, I feel like I owe it to them to keep taking as many swings as I can. Did I freeze? Am I still there?
I'm back.
There
Sorry.
you go. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I was like, this is on me. No. Perfect. Okay.
No, I was about to say, literally, David, I feel like we're kindred spirits because my comic book origin story. I'm Hispanic. I come from a Hispanic household. I didn't even know about like physical comic books. I knew about comic books because I grew up watching Spider-Man, the animated, and X-Men, but I'd never held a physical comic book till I was 24 years old. Walked in at the beginning of DC Rebirth, and the rest is history. But yeah, I had a cubicle job for a little bit. Then I decided to come work at a comic book store because I said, why am I beating myself up here when I could maybe do something else and actually enjoy it? So I do feel like we are the same person a little bit. Did you say that your first, so Spencer and Locke was literally like, other than those couple of shorts, the first thing you really started writing?
Yeah. So what I did was, and I say this is a really good exercise for anybody who wants to learn how to write comics. When I was working in my newspaper job, I wrote a short script every day for 90 days. And wow. They didn't have to be good. That's the thing. They don't have to be good scripts. They just have to be done scripts. Yeah. Because you very quickly, every time you finish, you realize, you learn, okay, like, what could I have done better? What can I learn from this in the next time?
Yeah.
Like it was during like Charlie Sheen's breakdown. So I had one like Rock Stars from Mars. Like that's the kind of like low hanging fruit I was working with.
Yeah.
The thing is, the twist is, they don't have to be good and you don't have to show them to anybody. You just have to finish them. So I wrote a bunch of those. I had written a screenplay. I'd written a couple of TV pilot scripts. Again, nothing that's ever been made. But Spencer and Locke was the first full-length comic I ever wrote. And yeah, I feel like I kind of tricked myself into it. I was like, oh, I wrote that script. That's kind of cool. All right, I'm going to write the outline. That's cool. I'm going to see if somebody draws some pitch pages just for funsies. And, I'm going to shop it around and see what happens. And then Action Lab emailed me about 20 minutes after I sent them a pitch. And they're like, how soon could you get this done? And I was like, oh, I got to write this book now.
So it kind of snowballed, huh? Like, it kind of happened. Like it became a thing.
I sort of dipped my toe into the pool enough times that I accidentally fell in. And so yeah, that was kind of the thrill of that. But yeah, it's funny because for the longest time I thought I wanted to be an editor. For my time at DC, and and I think it spoke to my own kind of Midwestern upbringing. I'd never met anybody who had made a living on creative stuff. So I figured like I had to have some sort of structure of an office job. And and it was only after that book came out and people liked it that I was like, oh, dummy, you're putting the cart before the horse. Like, I had thought if I had written a book, it would show that I could be an editor. And it's like, no, you idiot. Like, if you write a good book, that means you can be a writer.
Right.
So yeah, after it came out, I was like, oh yeah, doy. Like, of course, like I could just do this I could just keep writing. And so, I've been doing that ever since. But yeah, it's definitely, nobody's more surprised that I'm here than me, believe me. But I'm very grateful for it.
So David, tell me, what were your influences just as like a comic reader growing up? What was young little kid David? What were you reading at your beginning of comics?
Yeah, well, I was a '90s kid, so reading David Michelini and Eric Larson and Mark Bagley and on Spider-Man and Fatal Attractions for the X-Men. I'd say as far as influences go, Devin Grayson, her run on Batman Gotham Knights is like an underrated gem. It's criminal that it's not always in trade. Rick Remender's action pacing I really love. His work on Punisher was really influential on me. Afterlife with Archie, I know that's pretty late in the game, but that was a very big influence on me. You can see it in all my work. I really like the way that Brendan Fletcher and Cameron Stewart and Babs Tarr paced Batgirl. It felt it was done in one, but it had kind of an overarching structure to the whole thing. Yeah. So I tend to look to that a lot. The stuff that Jeff Johns does with theme and being able to weave that into character, I really like. He's got an issue of Justice Society of America that I always turn to. It's about Damage and Liberty Bell. And Damage, at the time, his face has been disfigured. He got punched out by Zoom a whole bunch of times, so he's wearing a mask. And it's his rematch with Zoom, and he's got Zoom in a stalemate. He's got him in a headlock. He could break Zoom's neck, but if he does, Zoom's vibrations will explode and destroy all of Atlanta. And Liberty Bell comes up to him, and she's trying to sort of destabilize the whole thing. And she says, she points to the bell on her chest, and it's got a crack in it. Just because something has a crack in it doesn't mean you have to throw it away. And that's a big, that's like probably one of my top 5 comics ever. I think about that one quite a bit. But there's a lot. I mean, I've got a whole shelf of comics right behind me, behind my laptop. I've always picked up from all sorts of folks. Grant Morrison, Mark Miller, Brubaker, I think is a pretty big influence on my stuff. But you name it, I'm a diehard comics fan, particularly superheroes in the direct market. That's sort of where I grew up. But yeah, I find that being able to take those sensibilities and then kind of bring them to anything other than superheroes has been kind of really fun and freeing, and has really kind of let me stretch my legs creatively, so to speak.
I think I'm still. I was. Yeah, this didn't lag on me. So, David, thank you so much, man, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The book is Scout's Honor. It's going to be on the shelves tomorrow. Anybody who comes into whether our store or any LCS and picks up Scout's Honor #1, just let them know what to expect. Give them that little elevator pitch again.
Yeah. So Scout's Honor, it's Fallout meets Mulan with a little bit of Hunger Games and Handmaid's Tale thrown in for good measure. It's the story of a post-apocalyptic cult whose Bible is an old Boy Scout manual, and what happens when a new trainee finds out a dark secret at the heart of the Ranger Scout doctrine. So fun for everybody, I promise.
Oh yeah. And David, he's done Spencer and Locke. Anybody that's read Spencer and Locke knows David now. Give this a try. We ordered heavy on it. We love it. All the Aftershock #1s. Thank you so much for your time, David. Actually, before you go, is this a mini or is this going to be an ongoing?
Mini. It'll be 5 issues. So January through May, and I believe that means that the trade will come out in September.
Perfect. So we got a little bit of David in every month for the beginning of this year.
Yes, yes. And anybody who wants to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Pepose D. It's my last name, first initial. David Pepose Comics at Facebook. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews, or visit my brand new website, davidpepose.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. Best of luck with the book, and we'll
you.
catch you around later.
Awesome. Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one, man. Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much. That was our 25th show. Crazy to think that we've been doing this for 25 weeks now. This was our 25th show. I want to give a special shout out to David. Scout's Honor. Absolutely picked this bad boy up here in the store. And then I'm also going to give a shout out to Ram V. Swamp Thing. Gave us a lot of insight on what Future State is, what to expect from this and the ongoing Swamp Thing. I have been Danny Morales. Today I've been helped by Maddie Durango, and we will see you tomorrow on our happy hour auction. Tons of great stuff, 5:30 every Wednesday, and we'll see you next Tuesday right here, same time, same